And today I'll be talking about risk assessments for corporate threats. So what is risk and why is it important to understand and manage it? And yet again, how? Risk is defined as the potential to harm or financial loss, and it's important to understand how to manage it to avoid unnecessary implications. Now, risk management is typically done through identifying and analyzing the risk, but it's important that a business uses that information to mitigate uncertainty. This can be done through many avenues such as financial, operational, and strategic risk management, but also managed using ISO 3100. ISO 3100 is a set of guidelines appointed by the International Organizations for Standardization, or ISO, to be capable of managing risk, setting objectives, and improving performance. And in this instance, it's been used to understand and manage the threat of severe tropical cyclone. This strategy was also paired with the using of corporate threat registers, or CTR, to help evaluate and justify findings. So let's get our bearings. There has been a severe tropical cyclone along the east coast of Queensland, causing moderate flooding and the destruction of homes and livelihoods of many people. The event has resulted in the closure of many businesses and roads, putting a pause on the working and social lives of the affected individuals. For Chirpy Plus members, this has restricted their ability to leave their homes for fear of flooding getting worse without their attention, so not being there to put that extra sandbag down. So many roads that connected members together have been closed, and as well as cafes and businesses that members regularly met at. So now we understand what's happening. By observing the consequences within the following risk matrix, this scenario consequences are to be deemed as moderate. This is due to the severe tropical cyclone resulting in moderate floods, prevents people from enjoying their usual social activities and focusing on the possible destruction of their homes. In addition, many businesses will have to close for rebuilding due to damaging property and assets. This type of natural disaster is often seen as the costliest in terms of finance and social lives. But whilst the long-term effects, including the damage to property, impacts on water quality, and damage to flora and fauna, the occurrence of these cyclones are often seen during autumn and winter, and its common occurrence warrants preparedness for the threat, therefore making it only relevant to hold a quarterly senior management review. With regards to the members of Chirpy Plus, these kinds of events can often affect social gatherings, ultimately leaving some members in a vulnerable state. With no businesses or homes for them to meet in, these members may fall prone to stress and isolation. Depending on an individual's ability to respond and recover, flooding can carry a varied impact. Within vulnerable individuals like elderly or isolated people, these impacts could carry more weight and can cause trauma and stress. In terms of likelihood, the east coast of Australia is situated within the tropics of the country, meaning its climate is prone to extratropical cyclones, also known as east coast lows or ECLs. This type of weather is not abnormal and one of the most costliest types of storms Australia experiences. The typical behaviour of ECLs commonly occur in the autumn and winter, presenting on average at least 11 times a year, with 4 causing landfalls. Whilst the number of these storms are anticipated to decrease, their severity inclines. With that in mind, it is almost per annum that the east coast of Australia experiences ECLs, making the event almost certain in its occurrence. Chirpy Plus should consider how ECLs affect their organizational time horizon. With the recent investment from Marbank International, the business expects to expand to overseas markets such as the United States. This is inclusive of an expansion to travel destinations like Egypt. To ensure the best value for Chirpy Plus's members, the availability of flights needs to be guaranteed. With the ECL's capability of producing hazardous flying conditions, this questions the overall delivery of the business and services for value of membership. Looking at the risk matrix, it can be determined that this threat has a high rating, meaning its consequences are moderate but also certain in occurrence. A quarter senior management review is required to determine an action plan for the threat. So at Chirpy Plus, General Manager and Host Leader Kylie Armstrong is to be informed of the high-rated risk that is almost certain in occurrence. Armstrong is to be the risk owner and is to ensure an action plan is built to combat the residual risk amounted from the threat. The plan is to ensure all steps have been considered to eliminate risk, and despite doing this action, is there any other impending risk that could follow? This plan should include the following calling cards or actions to ensure members retain their interest and their bonds with other members stay strong throughout difficult times. Alternatives could include things such as scheduled Zoom and Teams meetings to ensure contact is still maintained when it is needed most. Specific activities need to be planned by hosts to draw members' attention away from the cyclone and its implications. Consideration of technological skills needs to be considered, and the skills camp for those who need assistance with the software is to have access to this prior to the extreme weather event. If travel restrictions are in place from local government and trips have been scheduled and paid for, refunds are to be available to members or contributed to a later trip. This trip would ideally be scheduled for a time that suits all members affected. So Chirpy should also share the risk through the purchase of insurance. And whilst a business cannot physically deter an extreme weather event, they can provide alternatives for business to continue during any uncertain times. Additionally, a continual monitoring of weather conditions from certified sources should be observed to track any hazards that would further escalate the threat. The first instance in which things may escalate in this scenario is if the cyclone destroys the power lines within the main city of Cairns, for example. And secondly, if the prolonged implications from the cyclone occur, such as it's not clearing for 2 to 3 weeks afterwards. This may mean the members are unable to afford membership any longer due to the cost of rebuild and focus on escalation and disruption. In these instances, the situation escalates as the action plan alternatives no longer meet the requirements. The consequences of the action plan not meeting the escalated requirements leads businesses into very uncertain areas of risk. This may financially and reputationally impact the business. For example, members becoming severely stressed due to the implications of the cyclone and flooding. Plus, the additional effects of not being able to communicate with friends, leaving members isolated, ultimately inflicting stress and anxiety onto already vulnerable people. In this case, the involvement of founders Sean and Carol Mahoney are to complete an immediate action plan, which requires ongoing monthly senior management review. And despite doing everything, this action, is there any other impending risk that could follow? This query strikes a concern of credibility to this register. The following table lists the strengths and limitations to the use of a CTR and comparing it to ISO 3100. So whilst I was able to explain the context of the threat, the CTR is not capable of creating a full backstory to the situation. It purely states a brief overview of the risk context, and with that, there also comes the risk that not all external factors were able to be considered due to its lack of depth. The CTR also only allows the evaluation of one risk at a time, when multiple may be in fact affecting the business, just like our escalation triggers from beforehand. An additional observation was that the risk owner may be able to create a form of bias within the risk action plan for personal benefit. However, the CTR is very capable of identifying irregularities and assisting to spot additional threats such as escalations, evaluates consequences and their possibilities, and can develop strong risk mitigation plans for the evaluation of the original risk versus the escalation. It also simplifies the risk, allowing for a quick read and the threat to be assigned to an owner and for the action plan to take place in a timely manner. So for Chirpy Plus, this means there is a potential for two outcomes, one being to accept or reduce. If Chirpy Plus accept the initial proposal for introduction of safeguards, such as Teams meetings and the introduction of flood mitigation, so a course designed to show people how to build their homes and things to safeguard floods, this will have the appropriate services in place to ensure continued communication towards other members. On the other hand, if we avoid or transfer the risk in the event Chirpy Plus do not take into consideration the implications of cyclones, there may be reputational damage to the company as technology shows increased prevalence within our society and is used to combat extreme weather events. And without these safeguards, member retainment may drop, and it's also irrelevant for members to be using Chirpy Plus during extreme weather events. To ensure members and the company are receiving the most value, the following steps should be considered. Skills camp for Teams and Zoom's introduction, how to prep your home and for storms and floods, and gathering of members' preferred reimbursement method, whether it be refund or to be contributed to a further trip. In all, with this threat being a high-risk rating and the potential to be an extreme rating, it is vital that Chirpy Plus consider the preparedness and action plan and the initial condition of the threat. Thank you so much.